Good evening, everyone. We'll call the Public Works Committee meeting to order. If we'll have roll call at this time.
Yes, sir. Mr. Abshire?
Here.
Mr. Barris?
Here.
Mr. Bartie?
Here.
Mr. Brain?
Here.
Vice Chairman Bartie?
Here.
President Gilrery?
Here.
Mr. Hayes?
Here.
Mr. Landry?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. Marcantel?
Here.
Mr. Richard?
Here.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Stelly?
Here.
Mr. Tramonte?
Here.
And Chairman Andrepont.
Here.
Everyone's present.
Just a reminder, if you have cell phones, if you would place them on mute. Also, if anyone in the public would like to speak on a particular agenda item, we would ask that you fill out a blue card and turn it in to the front, please. Moving on to item 3, consideration approving active sale agreement for the Goss Road and at Campfire Road Site Distance Improvements Project in Ward 1.
So move, I adopt. Second.
Moved by Mr. Smith and seconded by Mr. Landry. Is there any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 4, consideration for approving temporary servitude and right use agreement with the road bridge replacement project in Ward 2.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Stelly and seconded by Mr. Abshire. Any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 5, consideration approving an active sale agreement for the Big Woods Vinton Road Bridge replacement project in Ward 5.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Marcantel and seconded by Mr. Burley. Any discussion there? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 6, consideration approving the following items related to the Dean Drive Bridge replacement project in Ward 4.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Barris and seconded by Mr. Bartie. Any discussion? Keep in mind, this has 3 parts, A, B, and C. The active sale agreement, the act, is that for all 3?
Yes.
Mr. Barris?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Any parts? Any opposition? Those motions carry. Item 7, consideration approving active sale agreements for the Niblets Bluff Road Bridge replacement and realignment project in Ward 7.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Barris and seconded by Mr. Landry. Any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 8, consideration approving of the active donation for LA 378
Second.
Phillips Road Turn Lane Improvements Projects. That was moved by Mr. Burley and seconded by Mr. Bartie. Any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Moving to item 9, consideration of approving the following amendments.
All bullets. All bullets.
On all bullets, A, B, A, and B. And that was moved by Mr. Stelly and seconded by Mr. Tramonte. Okay. Any discussion? Yes. Mr.
Senator
Gilrery.
Bartie, I'm just thinking, do you have to read those in, each one of them, or no?
If you'll read the highlighted.
Okay. A for Lonesome Engineers for the Patton Street Bridge Replacement Project in Ward 4, and B is CRS Incorporated, Amico Road Bridge Replacement Project in Ward 2. Any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 10, consideration of approving an amendment, ACOM Technical Services Incorporated for the Contraband Bayou Regional Detention Facility Project. That was moved by Mr. Abshire and seconded by Mr. Landry. Yes, Mr. Landry, you have the floor.
Y'all made me tell a lie. Because I was told that this was we were already going to be digging this thing by this time. I probably said that a year or so ago. So what's the holdup? Evidently, we hadn't started, because if we're still doing this, I just repeated what you told me.
First, let me apologize if I told you a lie, but
It might not have been you. I'm not, even though I'm looking at you, maybe it was Kim Connor. I don't know who it was.
But the timeline on the project has changed, and for a couple reasons. The bulk of the time that we've spent lately was getting to the point of finishing up our wetlands permitting on the site. So that is done. That took a little longer than need be, but that worked out. Really, the other time that has elapsed in getting this project to bid is really working on and the core part of this item that's before you is working on the the decision or whether we're going to include this into the state of Louisiana's Watershed Initiative program for funding. This is this item allows AECOM to go on through the process to put this into the Louisiana Watershed Initiative program for funding. Reason for that, and Alberto and Terry can back me up on this, is that our project here, the state of Louisiana has got some, I'd call it almost seed money for the overall program that they're really trying to push out to the parishes and the various districts that they have set up now. And that all came with set criteria. Our project, we feel like, is right in the breadbasket of that criteria to be 100% funded by the state of Louisiana. So we're looking at a $4 to $5 million project and feel like it would be in our best interest to spend the time to go on through the process of trying to get that funded. Terry, Alberto, if there's something in the Watershed Initiative maybe that you can add that gives us, if y'all understand about this project, be a good time.
Alberto Galan, Office of the Administrator. The state of Louisiana has put out $100 million out there for projects that are shovel-ready, that have high risk, low risk, high reward. The regional detention facilities already been designed, is a very good candidate to be funded in full by the state. Basically, the state just wants to see shovels in the ground quickly for this first round of funding. There's $1.2 billion hanging out there, but they want to see shovels in the ground now. And this is one of the projects that we think would have a very, very high shot. We've been told by the state has a very good shot of being funded in full.
So it is ready. I mean, everything's ready to go.
Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, it's worth. So how much longer we have to wait?
The pre-application has already gone in, and then the state will select projects from. They've gotten over 300 different pre-applications. The state will select certain projects to go through the full application phase. We fully expect this one to be selected, and we'll know that by April.
So just to answer on time, now the state's in a hurry, but that is what it is. They're inventing their processes as we go, which is okay. They're trying to figure out the best way to divvy up this money throughout the state. So the good news is we feel like we are a highly selectable project. We are going to be a little bit at the mercy of their timelines.
Okay. I think you got your law degree at an engineering school because you never answered my question. When? I understand the whole process and all that. I want to know when. I still don't know when. I know you can't tell me exactly. I won't hold you down to the month, but tell me about when. Is it going to be in 6 months or is it going to be in 2 years?
So if everything goes
Mr.
right,
Freelo,
Terry
if you would
Freelo,
state your
Terry
name for the
Freelo
record,
with
please.
Public Works Department. If everything goes as scheduled, we're looking at receiving full permission to submit the application or the process for the application in April, and then they'll be awarded around July. So my job and my plans are to be able to have all this done, which is going to be required after it's awarded, finish, and then that way we can actually bid the job out maybe August, August, September.
So we got delayed 8 months, but that's worse. We saved $5 million. That's a pretty good deal. All right.
Okay.
Now I have an answer because they've been asking me about it. Thank you.
Mr. Barris.
Thank you. So, one of y'all pick which one wants to take a pull at this. What are some of the parameters that are having to be vetted even farther to qualify for this? I mean, if we're ready to go and we have all our ducks in a row, what else? I'm just curious. What more to get this money? What parts of the project do we need to that need to be further designed, better designed? What's the hoops? What are the extra hoops that we're having?
So one, they have 300 applications they just received, so they have to vet through that and get the low risk, high reward projects picked out. Once they develop their application status for the full application, that will be distributed to the community, so we can actually go in and submit that application in. Then they have to go through those applications to determine how much money is going to be vetted towards each project. So there's a lot of red tape that you have to go through and deal with, and they're still finalizing the deal with the federal government to get the money that's actually needed.
Okay, so we're not gonna have to do anything further on our end, cause I see this ACOM for the increased services, I'm
Well,
just,
that is the further. So when you're dealing with a HUD grant or project, you have an environmental assessment that you have to do.
Okay.
So I'm trying to get ahead of that.
okay, I got you. I was fixing, I was just trying to get to what part of this, you know, brings it to the next level as far as what we have to prove.
When this
for-
is completed and that if they award us the money, then we can bid the project out faster.
Right.
But if it's not completed, then we have to do that step, which can delay it further.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries.
Move on 11.
Item 11, consideration approving a professional engineering agreement between the police jury and Meyer and Associates Incorporated for services and design related to improvements of various drainage laterals in Calcasieu Parish. That was moved by Mr. Burley and seconded by Mr. Brain. Any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 12, consideration of approving an amendment of Manshak Consulting Group related to the water system improvements and
Move on
expansion
12.
project.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Stelly and seconded by Mr. Smith. Any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 13, consideration
Move on 13.
of adopting an ordinance to establish a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit on Walcott Road in Ward 4. And that was moved by Mr. Tramonte and seconded by Mr. Stelly. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Barris.
Good luck with that, Mr. Tremonti.
Yeah. Yep.
I yield back, sir.
Anyone else? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 14, consideration of authorizing the parish engineer to advertise for the following projects.
So moved. All bullets.
All bullets. A is Big Woods Vinton Road Bridge Replacement Project. B is the Niblets Bluff Road Bridge Replacement and Realignment Project. Any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 15. That was moved by Mr. Abshire, and it was seconded by Mr. Stelly. Was there any discussion on that? Any opposition? That motion did carry. Item 15 is consideration of accepting the following as substantially complete.
Move on all
15 and
bullets.
all bullets.
Second.
A is new construction and miscellaneous roadway improvements of various roads in Calcasieu Parish. B is a Rossino Road Bridge Replacement Project. And C is the overlaying of various roads in Calcasieu Parish. That motion was made by Mr. Stelly and seconded by Mr. Barris. Is there any discussion on that? Yes, Mr. Barris.
Thank you. Mr. Connor, got a call yesterday, as a matter of fact. We're having some parking issues. Some of the Johnny Bro Road project, the road, the intersection of Amanda and Delta roads, and we've had some issues with overturned pipe trucks or materials trucks going down these residential, roads, and there's about 3 or 4 of them that's happened, and I don't know who the lead contractor is. I know who all's out there, but I don't know who's the lead on that. Maybe touch base with them and see if they can get a better handle on getting their materials to the job site, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. I'll make note of it. We'll get in touch with the contractor.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, any opposition? That motion carries. Item 16,
Move on 16.
consideration of accepting Coffee Farms Road, Part 2 subdivision located off of Coffee Farms Road in Ward 1. That was moved by Mr. Richard and seconded by Mr. Marcantel. Any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 17, consideration of
Move on
adopting a
17.
resolution to establish a name for a new public road between Thompson Road and East Pine Meadows Drive as Reverend Joseph A. Thomas Jr. Lane in Ward 1. That was moved by Mr. Smith and seconded by Mr. Stelly. Is there any discussion? Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 18, is there anything else that needs to be brought before this committee at this time? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a
Move to
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn. It was moved by Mr. Abshire and seconded by Mr. Hayes. Any opposition? We stand adjourned.
call to order today's meeting, the Thursday, January 30th Agenda Committee. I need a motion to pull item 18.
So move.
We'll take appropriate action on the terms of the following members of various boards, districts, and adopt resolutions approving appointments. A, Airport Authority of Airport District Number 1.
Move to defer for 30 days.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Burley. Any objection? Item B, Calcasieu Parish Planning and Zoning Board. Mr. Randy Ormitar was deferred on September 5th.
Mr. Ormitar resigned.
It's to reappoint,
The
it's to
reappointment
appoint
was
Mr.
deferred.
Keith Dubrow.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Stelly and a second by Mr. Landry. Any opposed? Item C, Calcasieu Parish Public Library System. Ms. Willie Mount.
So moved.
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Marcantel. Any opposed? So moved. Item D, Calcasieu Parish Public Safety Communications District.
Next month.
I have a motion by Mr. Tramonte and a second by Mr. Brain to defer for 30 days. Any opposed? Item E, Creole Nature Trail Scenic Byway District.
So move.
Move to defer.
Mr.
next
Sam
30
Wilkinson
days.
and Mr. Paul Guillory.
He won't,
Move to defer
moved
by
to
Mr.
defer.
Tramonte
and I'll second it.
and a second by Mr. Brain. Any opposed? Item F, Recreation
Move to
District
appoint
Number
Mr.
1
Van Richmond.
of Ward 4. Mr. Jeremy Duplichin. I have a motion by Mr. Burley.
He resigned, approved to appoint Mr. Van Richmond.
I have a motion by Mr. Burley and a second by Mr. Richard. Any opposed? Item G, Southwest Louisiana Regional Planning Commission. Ms. Shelley Mayo.
So move to
appoint Mr.
appoint
Eddie
Mr.
Lewis.
Lewis.
I have a motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Bartie to appoint Eddie Lewis Jr. Number 2,
Move to appoint Mr. Andrepont.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Richard to appoint Mr. Joe Andrepont. Item 3,
Move to reappoint Mr. Guillory.
Second.
a motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Bartie to reappoint Mr. Tony Guillory. Number 4,
Move to appoint Mr. Bartie.
I have a motion by Mr. Landry to appoint Mr. Bartie and a second by Mr. Burley.
To approve Mr. Guy Brain.
Second.
Item 5, move to appoint Mr. Guy Brame. I have a motion by Mr. Richard and a second by Mr. Landry. Any opposed? Item H, Ward 2 Fire
Move to
Protection District Number
reappoint
1.
Mr. Roland Bertrand
Second.
and Kenneth R. Derwin.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Stelly and a second by Mr. Landry to reappoint Mr. Roland Bertrand and Mr. Kenneth Derwin. Any opposed? Item I, Ward 6 Fire Protection District Number 1.
Charlie and appoint Ms. Brenda Vijay.
I have a motion by Mr. Marcantel and a second by Mr. Burley to reappoint Mr. Robert Bobby Charlie and Mr. Roger Marcantel, I'm sorry, Ms. Brenda Vijay. Any opposed? Item J, Ward 8 Fire Protection District Number 1.
Move to reappoint Kenneth Landry and Eric Johnson.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Stelly and a second by Mr. Tramonte to reappoint Mr. Kenneth Wayne Landry and Mr. Eric Johnson Sr. Any opposed? Item K, Waterworks District Number 10 of Ward 7.
Move to appoint Miss Amanda Hubert.
I have a motion by Mr. Barris and a second by Mr. Tramonte to appoint Ms. Amanda Hubert. Any opposed? Item L, Waterworks District Number 14 of Ward 5. I
Reappoint Mr. Gillis.
Second.
have a motion by Mr. Marcantel to reappoint Mr. Greg Gillis and a second by Mr. Burley. Any opposed? Item M, West Calcasieu Port Harbor and Terminal District.
Move to appoint Mr. Buddy Reams.
I have a motion by Mr. Barris to appoint Mr. Buddy Reams and a second by Mr. Andrepont. Any opposed? Item N, Workforce Development Board.
Move to appoint Ms. Kim Tozan.
I have a motion by Mr. Smith to appoint Ms. Kim Tozan and a second by Mr. Bartie. Any opposed? Motion carries. And have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.